And good evening, everybody, or I should say early evening on this Wednesday night for Ep.5 of the official Winnipeg Jets podcast on GShow Productions called Jet Fuel. I'm your host, Graham the GShow Forsyth. Happy to be here on the night the Winnipeg Jets kick off their 2023-2024 season. It felt like it came fast, honestly, but at the same time, off season, it always kind of goes by slowly. You're craving hockey, and great that we're able to be here. Well, myself able to be here. I'm going to be bringing on a guest in just a little while here, in Nick Lynam of Top Line Media. They do a lot of great stuff. He'll mention it near the end of the segment. We pre-recorded it today, but yeah, the official Winnipeg Jets podcast of GShow Productions, Jet Fuel, is brought to you sponsored by Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, your one-stop shop for all your industrial needs. Visit their store locations in Brandon and Winnipeg today. And also, we got a new promo code that you guys can use. It only works if you visit in store and purchase. Visiting their website is great, of course, makecanadafasteners.shop, but you'll get full value out of this promo code, and the only value you'll get from this promo code is if you visit in store. Until the end of October, if you use Jets Pod when you visit Make Canada Fasteners and Tools store locations, you'll get 5% off any tools you purchase and 10% off accessories and hardware products as well. So be sure to take advantage of that if you're in the need for some tools, accessories, and hardware from one of our official sponsors here on GShow Productions, Make Canada Fasteners and Tools. We're also brought to you by Terrico, serving Manitoba producers for over 80 years. Visit their website at terrico.ca to learn more about the great products that they provide. And also in Goaltenders, another sponsor here, your goalie's personal video review service. Finally got the slogan right, but be sure to visit GordyTumilsonGoalies.ca. He provides a goalie service, a Zoom, a one-on-one going through footage, doing it differently and doing it effectively as well. But yeah, the Winnipeg Jets kicking off their first game out of an 82-game season tonight in Calgary to take on the Flames at 9 p.m. Central Time. Should be a good one. We don't get into that matchup specifically in this episode with the guest in Nick Lynam, but we do talk about the most recent deals of Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele signing for 7 years for $8.5 million AAV. Also getting into the unfortunate news about Ville Heinola as he's out 8 to 12 weeks with a fractured ankle that he suffered in the last preseason game. And we also get into projected lines and our predictions for how we think the Winnipeg Jets will finish this regular season. You're watching the Jet Fuel podcast on GShow Productions, brought to you by Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. Without further ado, reoccurring guest on the show, coming on for the second time, Nick Lynam, joining me next here on Jet Fuel. And a returning guest to the Jet Fuel podcast here, airing this earlier, of course, since the Jets playing at 9 tonight. So we've decided to air this episode at 5:30, as mentioned. But it's Nick Lynam of Top Line Media joining this edition of the Jet Fuel podcast on GShow Productions. Nick, exciting times. The NHL season officially started yesterday. The Jets season officially underway tonight. What's the excitement level for you at?
Hey, it's the best time of year. Yesterday was like Christmas Eve. Team gets going tonight. Got to watch Connor Bedard's first game last night. Pretty scary for the Central Division when he looks that good in game one. But excited for the Jets season to kick off finally here with the game in Calgary tonight.
Yeah, and speaking of Bedard, only a secondary assist for one assist in his debut, but it was a beauty. A behind-the-back pass, finds a teammate, and Chicago able to create and score a goal. And yeah, the future is bright there. I wouldn't be surprised, shocked, honestly, if Bedard put up maybe close to point per game this season. He's that of a talent. But speaking of talent, staying in Winnipeg, Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele signing long-term deals. It was announced on Thanksgiving Monday, so 2 days ago. $59 million in total, 7 years, $8.5 million AAV contract set to kick in next season. Your thoughts first off on the Jets making a surprising move in terms of the timing.
Yeah, I was stunned by that announcement. I was in the car heading to a Thanksgiving dinner and just was blown away. I had to read it like 3 times. Obviously, massive to kind of get that conversation out of the way early this year. Because I think no matter how well the Jets were doing this year, everyone was going to be wondering like what's next for those two, right? Like the one train of thought was you couldn't lose them for nothing, and then the other thought was, well, they're going to be in the playoffs, I think, anyways. How could you trade them out of there? So yeah, I was absolutely stunned by both. I do think you gotta tip your hat to the organization on this one. I think for me personally, Connor Hellebuyck potentially ending his career in Winnipeg is a massive, massive win for the organization. This is a guy that I put on the same pedestal as like Henrik Lundqvist in New York or Carey Price in Montreal. Winnipeg has that guy. And it's lofty to say that, but I think if he were to retire a Jet, we're talking about a borderline Hall of Fame goaltender, drafted, developed, and stayed in Winnipeg. I think that adds such a credibility element to the Winnipeg Jets organization. The Mike Scheifele thing's interesting because that one was a lot more quiet, even like listening to some of the rumors and stuff. Sounds like even they admitted it came together pretty quick. That one I'm a little bit concerned about in comparison to the Hellebuck one, just from the fact Mark Scheifele is predominantly an elite offensive center, which great skill set to have, but he doesn't have that two-way element. So I'm wondering what's going to happen with his game as he kind of declines, as he's not able to control the offensive side of the game at the level he currently does. But for a team that's been saying they're trying to win now, I think they did pretty well on these deals. They look about to be about market value at least. A little long. We'll see what happens in 7 years, but I do think, yeah, I think you got to give the organization some credit here. That was a big, big Thanksgiving surprise.
Yeah, I think you got to give him credit too. And I think this is huge because, I mean, you could call Shifley a superstar or not. I don't believe he's a superstar, but he's a star player, big name player. And we know that Connor Hellebuck's a superstar. Like the fact that these guys believe in what this organization is doing and have chosen to sign here for the next 7 years, I think that speaks volumes about the Jets organization. I mean, there's people who crap on the organization all the time. I don't always agree with the moves they make, and a big thing is you can't get stars to Winnipeg, you can't keep them there. Well, this is kind of squashing that narrative in that regard. In terms of the players, like you got one of the best goalies in the world right now, and one of your top point producers for a long time locked up on long-term deals. And I think that's great with the cap going up. These two guys are going to be the highest paid players coming next year, and they're only making $8.5 million. And as that cap goes up, these contracts maybe look a bit better. But I think the negatives are for sure in terms of a guy like Shifley specifically. He doesn't have that two-way game. Like you said, elite offensive talent, but he's shown to be unreliable defensively, whether that's ability or just his lack of caring. And these contracts may not age the greatest, probably not in terms of how long the term is. For the first 4 seasons, they could look really good, but we'll see what happens after that. I think the pressure is on now for this Winnipeg Jets organization because that window to win now is in these next 4 to 5 seasons. They've improved this offseason. I believe they got some really good prospects. I think it's about who are they going to move on this roster now that's not really going to benefit them down the line, and how do you turn that into positive assets for yourself? How do you plug in guys like your younger guys down the line that are going to be ready to go? And of course, Gabe Vilardi, guys like Iafallo, they're only here on 2-year deals, so it's going to be essential to lock them up when it comes time to. But I think that this is a big win for the Winnipeg Jets, all things considering. Does it move them further into cup contention? There's still a lot of work to be done with the roster, but the fact you're able to keep these two big name players here long term, when there was so many questions, it just means that rumors at the end of the day really mean nothing.
Oh, for sure. It was absolutely a statement for the organization. It does change the narrative going in. I wouldn't quite say it makes them a Stanley Cup contender yet by any means, because they didn't really change the roster with these moves. They just have extended the window of these moves. with these two contracts. The next 3 to 4 years looks like the window. I think it's fair to suggest any contract after the age of 30 with term, you're expecting to get some value out of the front half of them, and you're looking to bleed some value on the back half as those guys age, and this league just keeps getting younger and younger. But if you look ahead, it might not be next year, but the Jets do have a pretty big opportunity 2 years out from now where their cap sheet is pretty clean. And I'm very curious how much that was sold to Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck that, hey, we have this farm system. We've really improved it over the last few years. And we're going to have money to spend in the next couple of years to kind of build something around you. That was the one thing I didn't think Kevin Cheveldayoff would have been capable of, was selling Connor Hellebuyck that this team can win a Stanley Cup. And clearly he sold both. So I'm very curious to see what that plan looks like. And mapping it out, I do think there's a pathway. My big question now is Kevin Cheveldayoff the guy to take this over, right? The things we consistently talk about are wanting to upgrade that top four on defense, right? And I'm a little nervous that he won't be able to do it adequately just because of the decor he's put together for 6 years now. It's kind of always been a bit of a drag on the team, but that forward group, I couldn't agree more, has been upgraded this year. It's a deeper group. I'm expecting some breakouts from Cole Perfetti and Gabe Vilardi as well up there. So a lot to be excited about. I'm just now curious what's next to kind of take the next steps with this organization.
Yeah, and you're so right in terms of Kevin Cheveldayoff. Like, even though these moves were made, I've questioned, his aggressiveness and his ability to go all in. And you're going to have to go all in these next 3 to 4 seasons, like you said, maybe even 5, to get this team to true Stanley Cup contention level. I mean, like you said, the decor is still an issue with this team. Now, it sucks that the best defenseman for the Jets in the preseason is out for the next 8 to 12 weeks, which we'll get into in just a moment. But it's up to Cheveldayoff now. You've made the first moves in terms of signing these guys long term, like you wanted to, guys you feel you can win now with. It's about how do you make the rest of the team better. Cheveldayoff hasn't proven adequately, like you said. He's been necessarily able to do that. I think, like you said, the next big move is improving that decor, but we'll see what happens. We'll see if Chevy, waits it out like usual and gets back into a corner and has to make a move, or if he actually, grows a pair a bit and ends up making a big move to get this team even better, because the time to win now is now. This team has shown that they're not going to rebuild. They're more so in the retooling aspect of things. It's going to be interesting to see for sure. But Ville Heinola out 8 to 12 weeks with a fractured ankle. Heartbreaking to see that night in the last preseason game for the Jets. Nonetheless, Nick, I believe he was going to be a huge difference maker on this Jets blue line this season with the way he's able to transition, his offensive ability, something that the Jets really lack on that decor. And he's shown improvements too, even though it's just preseason. In his gap control, his stick's always been good in terms of how he uses it. And he was limiting some of the best players for the other teams, especially in that Ottawa game in this preseason. Your thoughts on, just this devastating situation for Ville Heinola, who had by far his best camp since being drafted by the Jets?
For sure. Heartbroken for Ville. I just can't imagine being in that spot. He was kind of told for years, like, he was going to have to come in here and earn it. There was just no pathway. The team didn't even expect him to come in and win a job this year. We had heard all up until that last game. It's unlikely, like, the waiver thing plays in. And he comes in and has the camp of his life after having probably the summer of his life to do so. And had not only come and made the team, but came and stole a job in the top 6. And for a 22-year-old defenseman, I think that would have been absolutely massive. You touched on it. Something that annoys me with a lot of the talk around this team is the idea that guys like Nate Schmidt and Neil Pionk, you can't have a Ville Heinola in because they do the same thing. Meanwhile, those aspects of transition and offense, those two players have completely struggled at for years now. I couldn't agree more. I was looking at Ville Heino's camp and wondering if in January, after a good half season of getting some games, and we were looking at a potential answer in the top four, beside maybe a Dylan Sandberg, who they've also developed and looks to be ready to take another step. I've banged on the Heinola drum for years. It was very exciting to see it coming to fruition, and I'm just hoping for the kid that he comes back healthy and he's able to pick up where he left off, because the idea of bringing in a young guy that can still grow throughout the season and that defenseman being better than what's already in house was very, very much a big potential positive on both the team at 5-on-5 with, like you said, the transition game, defending even compared to some of those counterparts in the lineup. But also potentially the power play too, where he was looking like he was going to get some games on the Cole Perfetti unit. And if you were around for Cole Perfetti and Ville Heinola with the Moose, those two just see the game so well. From an IQ perspective, they were so fun to watch. I was curious what they could bring with a Nick Ehlers and a Nino Niederreiter on that second unit. So yeah, I really do think this is a bigger loss than maybe others do, just because I think over the long term of an 82 game season, he really had the potential to pop and bring something that was really lacking at the price of the last year of an ELC, right? So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and of course, I think there should still be, room for him to make this lineup, down the line once he does return, especially if, guys like Pionk, Schmidt, even Dylan continue to struggle. I said it on last week's show, Nick, that I think that Villanola is better than Brendan Dillon right now, better than Pionk right now, better than Schmidt, and of course, Miles better than Logan Stanley. You just look at what the Jets lack on the decor outside of Josh Morrissey. I mean, people would argue Neil Pionk as a good puck moving defenseman, but I disagree with that. I think he, cost the team more than he benefits this club. It's just the way Dylan Sandberg and Ville Heinola looked together during this preseason. That would have been an exciting, effective pair for the Jets, where you get a defensively reliable Dylan Sandberg, who's of course looking to add other parts to his game, and a guy in Ville Heinola who is already elite with the transition and looks like he improved his defensive game. It would have given the Jets another year on that second power play if Heinola was able to quarterback it. Now you're stuck with guys like Pionk and Schmidt on that PP too. And yeah, it's just unfortunate because it gives this teams more reasons now, obviously, to play guys like Schmidt and maybe even a guy like Stanley if Schmidt is struggling in the lineup. I hope Declan Chisholm does get a shot. If he does, end up earning that shot, which I think he did have a pretty solid preseason, but no one had a better preseason than Ville Heinola did on the Jets blue line, and it's just heartbreaking to see because he would have been underrated X factor on this Jets blue line this season.
Yeah, my heart hurts for that one. That's for sure. We'll see what happens. A fracture and surgery might not be a bad case scenario here. Those ligament injuries can tend to linger a bit, so we'll see with a full recovery. But it's hard to envision now, after missing 3 months, upwards of 3 months, that he's gonna kind of have the same runway in the heart of a season that we were looking at the beginning, and I think that hurts the Jets' potential outlook here.
Yeah, for sure. Recovery time taken into that, getting back into game shape. These are all things Ville Heinola needs to do, even more urgent now that he is going to be missing extended time. But the projected lineup for the Winnipeg Jets, it's, very similar, pretty much similar to what they were running near the end of preseason. Connor, Scheifele, Velarde on the top line, Niederreiter, Perfetti, Ehlers on that second line. I follow Lowry, Appleton on that fourth line, Baron, Kuparian, Mesnikov on that fourth line, Morrissey, DeMello, Sandberg, Pionk, Dillon, and Schmidt round out that decor. Your thoughts, at this lineup, would you change anything in terms of the line combinations, either forward or defensively?
Oh, I got my coaching hat on all the time looking at this lineup, but I think that's one of the positives about the forward group this year is I think there's so many different combinations you could take a look at that might work That I think we're going to see some movement throughout the first couple months. I wouldn't look at these lines or pairings. The pairings would probably be close to locked in, but I wouldn't look at the forward group and think anything's locked in. I'm excited to see what a Gabe Vilardi can bring to a Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele line at 5-on-5 that hasn't been good for some time. The defensive conscience he brings that Blake Wheeler didn't have anymore at that stage of his career. Or they were running, guys like Carson Coolman through that spot last year at times. So I'm curious to see what Gabe Vilardi can do on that line. He's someone that stood out to me as a sneaky smart player during the preseason. He just seems to really understand the details of the game, and I think that could work next to a Mark Scheifele. And at that point, that just leaves Kyle Connor to be kind of the third piece that you're hoping to get the puck to, which is how I see Kyle Connor. I don't see him as a driver of success. I see him as the benefactor of his line mates, kind of like Phil Kessel in Toronto. That's how I look at
Right.
Kyle Connor. The second line is going to be interesting because of the Nick Ehlers injury, we never saw it in camp. But I think the three pieces can work. Cole Perfetti, I'm high on. I think he's going to be okay in that 2C role, though it's going to have some bumps along the way. Just the elite hockey IQ. He looks thicker in camp. He looked a step faster in camp, which was my biggest concern with him. Beside Nick Ehlers, who can transition that puck, one of the best zone entry machines in the NHL, that can get that unit down to the offensive zone and let a guy like Nino Niederreiter cause disruption as the two skilled high IQ guys kind of work off each other. It's a lineup I'm really curious to see how the pieces fit there once we get some time. The IFL Lowry Appleton line is kind of where I see the Jets potentially needing an upgrade come trade deadline. I still think this team does lack one more top six level scorer, maybe a mid six you can get away with to put onto that line. I know they kind of look at Mason Appleton as that driver of goals. I just don't see that coming based on what we've seen from Mason Appleton in the past. Though I think last year, at the end of the year, he really fit as the third wheel to that Nino Niederreiter Lowry Appleton line. And I wonder if we see them get back to that once you kind of get a look at this, right? Because last year towards the end of the year, Nino Lowry and Appleton was one of the best lines down the stretch. It really carried the group. And it would allow you to do some different things in that top six as well. One of the things I'm wondering is if we get to a Vilardi Iafallo line, because in LA the last couple of years, they've dominated the expected goal share. They've dominated the Corsi share, and they've been a plus unit no matter who their centers were. That's something I'm kind of curious about as the year goes on. On the D side of things, Dylan DeMello, Josh Morrissey, you know what you're getting. I'm just my big question there is, do we see the same level from Josh Morrissey in back-to-back years? That's a top 15, top 10 defenseman. The big question for me is going to continue to be Neil Pionk in the top four. Last year we saw him play 22 minutes, and the Jets were a net negative with him on the ice in those minutes. There's no way around it. Can Dylan Samberg stabilize that when Brendan Dillon could not? I think that's a big ask for a young defenseman stepping into the top four. And then you got the veteran pair at the bottom that kind of reminds me of the Myers-Kulikov pair back in 17-18 when this team went on a run. That third pair is a little expensive for how you want to spend the salary cap, but it kind of has those elements of that previous pair. And Dylan and Schmidt played pretty well together as a second pair down the stretch last year as well. I think the decor is all right, but it has a very clear hole on the right side right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, going back to the forward core, I think that the Jets could very well add. I think that could be something they look at in terms of adding a middle six scorer at the very least to help bolster that depth. But I've been thinking about this a lot. I wouldn't mind seeing Niederreiter go to that line. You add Aya follow up. He plays with a big time play driver in Nikolai Ehlers, a guy with high Cole Perfetti, and Iafallo can be kind of that defensive, more reliable defensive player on that line, adding to, of course, the defensive reliability that a guy like Perfetti will bring. It's going to be interesting to see if maybe Perfetti struggles at center, if they end up switching Vilardi to center, trying him out there. It's going to be interesting to see as the season goes along. But I think in terms of the decor, with the Hanoli injury, I mean, this is as good as it's going to get at this point. I think that
Hmm.
ideally the fit of that mold of that second pairing with Dylan, Samberg, and Pionk, you got the more defensive, reliable Samberg, and maybe that opens up Pionk to take more chances on the rush. I do agree with you. I do think that's a big negative on the Jets decor. I think Dylan and Schmidt as that third pairing, like you said, as expensive as it is, I think that it's all right. I think that Dylan's probably going to get better as the season goes along. I don't think he had a very good camp at all. But yeah, I mean, with the decor, there's not as much variation that you can play with. Maybe a guy like Declan Chisholm ends up getting a shot, and we see where he ends up, playing as the season goes along throughout that, top six. If there is injury there, I could see him getting in then. But yeah, going back to that forward group, I think Velarde being on that top line with Shifley, you add that defensive reliability to two players that aren't that good in the defensive zone. And I'm gonna say it right here. I think Velarde is gonna be a better player than Pierre-Luc Dubois is at this point and moving forward for the Winnipeg Jets. I do think that right now the Jets have their six best forwards in terms of players that can put the puck in the net and generate offense in that top six. It's just going to be interesting to see if they need a bit more offense from that third line, if they switch Nino Niederreiter with Adam Lowry and Appleton, and if they tried Velarde and I follow together, because like you said, they were pretty dominant together in LA.
For sure. Yeah. I think we're going to see a ton of movement up front this year. I'm just very curious to see what's going to click, what's not, because it's going to look different than seasons past. Seasons past, we were overly reliable on the top six, and in the bottom six would just get absolutely slaughtered in games. And the problem with that was, as as much skill as there is at the top of the Jets lineup, there's no elite player to drive the bus like you see when you get a top draft pick at the top of most drafts. So that they couldn't really afford to lose those bottom 6 minutes. I think that bottom six, the fourth line is probably the first time I've seen three NHLers on the fourth line to start a season in Winnipeg. So I'm very curious to see what the mix of a stronger bottom six with maybe not as much game breaking talent in the top six, but more reliable potentially talent at this stage. Like honestly, losing Blake Wheeler out of the top six is an addition by subtraction at this stage of his career. I think that's pretty big, and yeah, I'm very excited to see where this is going.
Yeah, I agree. And even going back to the decor, like you said about Morrissey, can he keep up the offensive production from last season? I could see a season from Morrissey where he puts up close to or over 60 points and we see a more defensively reliable Josh Morrissey. Not saying he wasn't reliable defensively last year, but he sacrificed a bit of defense for more offense. So that's going to be interesting to see. And he gets top line power play minutes. We'll get into our prediction for the Jets coming up this season in just a moment here, but we're going to talk about the special teams here next, Nick. It's I follow Shifley, Connor, Velarde, and Morrissey on the points on that top PP unit. Niederreiter, Perfetti, Ehlers, Pionk, and Schmidt. Pionk and Schmidt on the points on that second PP. The PK, Lowry, Appleton, Dylan DeMello, Kupari, Connor, as well as Samberg and Pionk. Now, for me, I mean, like, Kyle Connor, your best goal scorer outside of last year was Mark Scheifele. You got him on that right side, looking for him on one timers. I think that him and Velarde in that one game that they played with each other, that I got to see early in preseason, they looked like they had really good chemistry. I also like the aspect of Velarde having that big time shot on the point. I would like to see Nikolai Ehlers on that first PP, but I guess the Jets are looking to balance it out. I like how you got that top, or not the top line, but the second line together, and Niederreiter, Perfetti, and Ehlers together to keep that chemistry together if they are playing together this season. It's just, I think the holes there is Pionk and Schmidt on the back end of that power play. Not that comfortable with that as a Jets fan, but I follow on that first PP. That's interesting. I'm wondering what his role is going to be. Probably that guy that's going to go into the corners, battle for pucks, and a guy that could be screening the goalie as well. PK wise, the Jets improved in their PK percentage last year. Lowry and Appleton, a guy that Rick Bowness and the staff really likes together. They're kind of tasked with doing the defensive things for the Jets. I don't think Appleton is impactful as some Jets fans think. You got your best defensive defenseman in Dylan DeMello on that first PK. Brendan Dillon, I guess that big body mentality having him there, I would almost like to see Sandberg take a spot there. And then, yeah, I mean, PK2, you got Kupari, who's going to be a reliable centerman in the faceoff dot. I think Kyle Connor has shown some good spurts on the PK in terms of him being able to create some rushes for. It's just he's not the greatest defensive player, but I guess the Jets thinking that his offensive ability is going to kind of make up for that on the power play. And then Sandberg, I think, is going to be fine, but once again, Pionk on that pairing there, yeah, not that comfortable with that, to be honest with you. So I think that based off Bonus's system, I think that with Connor Hellebuck in net as well, and when Brossoit plays, this PK should be fine again. I'm interested to see how the power play looks. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the PK. I think specialty teams really does lie in the hands of coaches a lot in the systems that were being played. For years, we had seen the Jets PK be about as passive as can be, and it was just a shooting gallery every time they took a penalty. The goal was to keep as many shots from the outside, but it was such a leaky penalty kill for years that didn't happen. Bonus has turned up the aggression a little bit, which is I like to see in the NHL. The one thing that I always think, anyways, is your penalty kill is going against the absolute best players on the other team in the world. Why give them time and space if you can get on them? Why do you want to give those guys the time and space? So I like a bit more of an aggressive system. They're still going to lean on Connor Hellebuck quite a bit on that penalty kill. As for the power play, it just has to be better this year. The one thing I would say is, yeah, you got to get Nick Ehlers on that first unit. The big thing he brings there is both the zone entry, so you're setting up, you're not dumping and chasing on a power play, which I absolutely despise seeing. And his movement at the top of the zone when he's on that left flank really helps to draw a penalty killer to make a decision. You're either going to be forced to take Nick Ehlers, which opens back up Josh Morrissey at the top, or you're going to let Nick Ehlers walk in, and I'll take Nick Ehlers shooting from the slot as a quality opportunity in that power play. And the lower he gets, one of those low guys is going to have to make a decision, and you can dish it off backdoor down low, right? I just think he offers so much more potential danger on a power play. One of the big reasons the old Jets power play was so elite was, yeah, you had the Byfuglien Lyne shots, but you also had Mark Scheifele in the dead slot where he can beat NHL goaltenders no problem, and you had Kyle Connor on the bottom. And this allowed Blake Wheeler to really pick between four potential scoring threats. So I'm a big believer, the more opportunities you have out there to score, the harder it's going to be to defend. Like it just feels like common sense to me. So I don't love the follow in the slot. I know we're going to hear that it's because Nick Ehlers and Mark Scheifele like to play the same spot. Mark Scheifele was really successful in the center of the ice in the middle of a power play. I think he fits there really well and should be there. And then Gabe Vilardi on the bumper. I do like that. You saw flashes of it in that preseason game when he made that pass after, taking the bump on his back, spinorama. Just a smart player, like I said. He's going to be in there in the corners, kind of winning those puck battles. Good body to screen. I just don't know about the eye follow in the slot aspect. On the flip side, yeah, your second pairing or power play unit does look better. But we've seen in this organization that unit doesn't historically get a lot of ice time. And historically, whatever power play Nick Ehlers was on has been the Jets power play. So it's counterintuitive to me to play the guy that leads to the best results in a lesser pair or group with lesser partners in lesser ice time. Because the one thing about the Jets forward group, I do think we are going to see times where it's hard for them to score. They're not as gifted in that department. They're going to be harder to play against and going to give up less, I think, as the flip side to that. but they're gonna need that power play to come through for them in stretches, and I do worry about that a tad.
Yeah, and I think that Nikolai Ehlers, there's no reason why he shouldn't be getting power play one time, PP one time. I think that you should put your best players, on your number one power play. And Ehlers, like you said, creates so much and can suck in so many guys. And he's such a player with great vision that he can make these really good passes. I do agree with you on that. I hope that it does change at some point, and we see Ehlers getting the ice time he deserves on PP1 for the Jets this season, so they can get the most out of players like Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Velarde, and Morrissey on that pairing with the type of not quite game breaking ability, but pretty close that Nick Ehlers brings with his skill set. Just hoping he can stay healthy this season is the biggest thing. But last thing
Mm-hmm.
we got to talk about here, Nick, is the prediction for the Jets. I'll let you go first. Where do you got them finishing this year? Do you got them playoffs like you've been saying? Where do you got them in the playoff picture?
The Lynam lock is they're coming third in the Central Division this year. I have them ahead of Minnesota for that spot. I think this team is better than it's getting credit for right now, and I think there's going to be a lot of people looking back and saying, "Oh, like who could have seen this coming?" But I do think the Jets are better than last year. I do think they take a step, and I'm also worried about Minnesota. Just being in the cap hell they are, they're constantly trying to fill in those spots with cheap players, and they lost one of the better defensemen in the league, Jared Spurgeon, for week to week right now. Could be upwards of 2 months. I think the Winnipeg Jets are coming third place in the Central this year. I'm not saying I'm going to pick them to go on a run yet. I want to see what they kind of add by the trade deadline, but I do think they will be in a playoff spot this year.
Yeah, I agree. I got the Jets finishing top three in the Central as well. I think that people may forget that this team was first place in the Central Division at one point last season with a worse roster. Like you said, they got better this offseason. I think, no matter what we've talked about in terms of they don't have that, talent to score throughout the lineup, I do think that they have the better depth. And even though that decor isn't the greatest overall, you still got some really good pieces on that decor in terms of a guy like Josh Morrissey, Sandberg looking to take that next step, DeMello being the key defensive defenseman he is. And they're also backstopped by one of the best goaltenders in the division in Connor Hellebuck. Now, I'd say the only guy that you could say is better than him outright is maybe a UC Saros, but Hellebuck's playing in front of a much better team, I think. And last season
Mm-hmm.
was the first year of a Rick bonus system that took some time for the Jets to adjust to. The players that are returning, they are used to this system. They know what to expect out of Rick Bonus's system. And the players coming in, like Velarde, bring such a good two-way all-around game that it's transferable, I think, in any system. I think the Jets are going to surprise teams this season. I think that Dallas and Colorado are going to be top two in that division, but I do think that the Jets overtake a team like Minnesota, a team that doesn't have the greatest center depth, a team which their decor is going to be missing their best player to start off the season, and a team that, even though they played so well in terms of the 5-on-5 game analytically, have struggled in the special teams department in the last few years. The Jets improved analytically last season with Rick Bonus's system. Their power play still needs to get better, but the PK was a huge improvement. I think the Jets build off of last year and make it in top three, third place in the Central Division, like you said.
Yeah, would be a lot of fun if that were to come true. Biggest thing I'm curious about is what are they going to add if they're in that position? That's where the conversation for me is. It is interesting though if the pessimists are right and they're like a ninth, tenth place. What happens then? Because then they kind of put themselves in the Calgary spot of last year, where you just locked up a ton of guys late into their 30s and you're not in the playoffs. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, it will be fascinating for sure. I think the Jets look to their easier contracts to move, maybe, and sell a bit. It's going to be interesting to see what happens come trade deadline. It's going to be fun to talk with you more on the show as the season does get underway on the Jet Fuel podcast here, Nick. Thanks for joining me. It's always great talking to you. Doing this for a second time was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And, make sure you guys check out Top Line Winnipeg. We're doing this once a week as well. And it's been a lot of fun. So really enjoying it.
Course, be sure to check out his show, Top Line Winnipeg. And yeah, they also got some other podcasts that they have covering other teams like the Calgary Flames, adding the Toronto Maple Leafs, and forgetting off the top of my head, you said Vancouver
The Vancouver Canucks, Edmonton Oilers, and Toronto
Edmonton.
Maple Leafs, as well as we get the whole band together every couple of weekends to just discuss what's going on in the league as a whole. If there's any fun stories, any shitty stories, just have some fun during the hockey season here.
Well, right on it. It's going to be fun to check out Nick's show. Hoping to have him on this show again in the future. Nick, you take care, man. Enjoy the game tonight.
Yeah, you take care too. Thanks, bud.
And Nick Lynam of Top Line Media joining this edition of the Jet Fuel podcast as the Winnipeg Jets kick off their season tonight in Calgary, taking on the Flames, a team where a lot of people have high hopes for them to make the playoffs, and I could definitely see it. Evan Samoilov, a guest on the show, keeps bringing this point up to me when we have our conversations over Snapchat about how they lost 19 OT extra time games last year. That is crazy, like you said, and I do agree with that. So it's not going to be an easy matchup for the Jets tonight, but one where I think that they I'm going to say it. I think that the Jets start off their season with a win tonight. I think it's going to be a close game. I think Connor Hellebuyck pulls through and has a really good performance to start the season. I think Velarde's going to be looking to impress, and I think he will. And yeah, I think that this Jets team is going to get going with their details in this game, play effectively, and take the win. A close one in Calgary. I got the Jets winning. Let's go 4-2 tonight. 4-2 with an empty netter in there from the Jets. Gonna be exciting. And yeah, Nick and I, we talked about how, at the end of that conversation on this podcast that you just saw, how the Winnipeg Jets, if they're in a position where things aren't going so well, who are they going to move? Well, looking at players that, are upcoming UFAs, I think a guy like Nino Niederreiter, as much as I love his game and as much as he's been a positive for the Winnipeg Jets, that could be someone that I think they could move. He's only making $4 million. He'd benefit a playoff team's depth, I believe. And he's a UFA coming up next year. Another guy who I think a team would add are guys like Brendan Dillon and Dylan DeMello. It's going to be interesting to see if the Jets look to lock up DeMello on, fairly cheap deal. He's making $3 million right now on his current contract. Brendan Dillon making $3.9 million. I'd say the guy that I'd be more comfortable moving if I was the Jets would be a guy like Brendan Dillon, because Dylan DeMello has been that good. But if the return is there for DeMello and it does get you better, I think the Jets could pull the trigger on it. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, I think that the Jets are going to finish top 3 in the Central. I think they're a playoff team this season. They got the pieces to do it. I don't think that they're going to make a huge run in the playoffs. If they do make it, I think that Dallas and Colorado, what they have, it might be a bit too much for the Jets unless Connor Hellebuyck comes out and absolutely steals. But as much as I've liked the Jets additions, like me and Nick were talking about, I think you need to add a bit more to really solidify yourself and get yourself to that next level. But speaking of contracts for the Winnipeg Jets, the two ones that we talked about, Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck, I only saw this video today, just saw it on TSN before starting this edition of the Jet Fuel podcast, episode 5. They actually signed them while talking to the media while the media was there. So yeah, I'm not sure how often that happens. It seemed kind of unusual to me, but a boss move by Kevin Cheveldayoff and this Jets organization to allow that to happen. It was pretty funny too. He's like, doesn't really matter which one I give them because it's identical contracts. But leave your thoughts in the comments what you think of the Scheifele and Hellebuyck deals. I definitely think that for Mark Scheifele, he needs to up his defensive reliability to get the most out of this contract. Like Nick said, as players age, they lose some of that offensive touch. The players that age the best are the ones that are two-way. And Mark Scheifele hasn't exactly shown that in his career. As time has gone along, I think you know what you're getting with Connor Hellebuyck. An elite goaltender still, a guy that was in the Vezina conversation, and a guy that's always going to be motivated to win a cup. I think something that could do him well, though, is playing, maybe less games down the line, but he's still good for 65 games. The big thing, like we talked about, is these contracts. They're going to, I think, look good in the first 4 years of them. It's all about how they look on the back end, as both of these guys will be about 37, 38 when these contracts are up. That's just gonna about do it for the Jet Fuel podcast. I just want to update you guys on who else is playing in tonight's matchups for anyone that may be watching. Right now, the Leafs and Canadiens, they're set to go. It's the end of pregame, as the score is saying. Toronto, they're apparently unveiling a new goal song tonight, which is interesting. It'd be funny if they got shut out. But the Carolina Hurricanes and Ottawa Senators playing each other in Carolina. That one about 40 seconds in at this point. Chicago and Boston coming up later. Bedard playing in his second NHL game in back-to-back days. The Colorado Avalanche visit the LA Kings, who a lot of people, I think, are kind of sleeping on LA this season. I've seen people saying they missed the playoffs. I don't think they got any worse. As much as I'm, not the biggest PLD fan, I think that, given the right situation, which I think LA can be, he's going to be a huge addition for that center core, with you moving Deneau to that third line, having Dubois come in and take the second line center position behind Anze Kopitar, who is still a really good player. Of course, the questions are about the goaltending, but their goaltending was shaky last season, and they still made the playoffs. Yes, teams have improved in the Pacific, but I think that, I think LA's going to be making the playoffs again and could be a potential dark horse come playoff time to maybe surprise some teams. But the Edmonton Oilers and Vancouver Canucks, along with the Winnipeg Jets and Calgary Flames, starting at 9 p.m. Central tonight. McDavid and the Oilers starting their quest to finally get that cup for them. I know Oilers fans would love that. Vancouver trying to make it back into the playoffs finally. But I don't see Vancouver making it, to be honest with you. It should be interesting to see, though. Leave your thoughts. Which game outside of the Jets are you most excited to watch tonight? And yeah, just want to give another shout out to our sponsors in Terrico, as well as Goaltenders, and of course the one, as you saw earlier and throughout this episode, McKenna Fasteners and Tools. I've been your host of the Jet Fuel Podcast, Graham the GShow Forsyth, for episode 5. I want to thank everyone for tuning into this one, whether you were watching it here on YouTube or listening in on Spotify on GShow Productions. Be sure to check out our website, gshow.ca. I'm still learning how to use it, uploading content there, so more content will be coming soon. I want to thank Nick Lynam of Top Line Media for coming on this episode. Be sure to check out their podcast that they run over at Top Line Media. A lot of fun stuff, by the sounds of it, goes on over there in terms of what they talk about. And yeah, thank you to our sponsors, of course, McKenna Fasteners and Tools, as well as Terrico and Goaltenders. Of course, with McKenna Fasteners and Tools, if you use promo code JETSPOD until the end of October when you visit their store locations, it has to be in person like I mentioned earlier in this episode, but either in Brandon or Winnipeg, you will get 5% off all tools by using the JETSPOD promo code, as well as 10% off accessories, and hardware products if you choose to buy that. Whatever products you buy out of those, you'll get a bit of a discount. So that's great. Also want to thank Nico Feniak once again for producing the intro and outro of this podcast. The Jet Fuel podcast will be returning next week on Wednesday night. Time to be determined. Might air it earlier, might air it at 9 p.m. Central Time, but not too sure yet. But before I let you guys go, we've been inactive on GShow Productions as of late. I was going through some stuff this past weekend, some stuff that was hard to deal with. Still had a fantastic Thanksgiving, getting to see family, and family I haven't seen in a while. It was nice to reconnect. But yeah, I'm feeling a lot better now, but there were times where things were tough this past weekend, going through some stuff in my personal life. I just want to let anyone know out there, you have amazing friends and people to talk to, in terms of no matter what you may be going through, no matter what you may be feeling when you're going through a tough time, and that really did end up helping me in ways. So just hope everyone's staying strong, everyone's staying safe out there through what could be tough times for some people, and I hope you enjoy tuning into this podcast and having a good time here as I do every time I do the Jet Fuel podcast. But yeah, that's going to be it for me, Graham the G-Show Forsyth, giving you the salute, peacing out, and saying so long. Enjoy the Jets game tonight, Jets fans. Enjoy that home opener coming up on Saturday, as the Florida Panthers will be in town. And yeah, until next Wednesday, take care, everybody.